Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about pet adoption. That is a thinker, and luckily I have Ian here who's going to help us think about this in a whole new way. So thank you so much, Ian, for coming onto my show, sharing your time and your perspective with me. I'm truly honored. But let's go ahead and dive right in. When you hear those words, pet adoption, what does that make you think about?
Well, I started fostering dogs about 15 years ago, my wife and I, because we lived in San Francisco and our building didn't allow pets. So we snuck a little foster in thinking, well, we could say it was just like a, temporary thing. Don't worry, it's not a full-time pet. Anyway, that was the first foster fail because we adopted him a week later. And now, nearly 15 years later, we're, I think, at the 255 odd dogs that we've had come through our home and our rescue and then be adopted. And to answer your question, what does it mean? Well, most people, if you have a family, I suppose, adopting a dog actually grows the size of your family, you know? And if you're a single person, adopting a dog gives you company all the time and company that's going to love you every day. So to me, it's the best use of your time is to rescue a dog.
Yeah, most definitely, because it really brings something that you don't even realize. Like, you don't realize that you may have rescued them, but they have rescued you in one way or another that you didn't even realize, because I rescued my first dog, and he was from a breeder, but you could tell that he was mistreated and he was abused because he showed all the signs. He was extremely timid. He was extremely like
Yeah.
scared of everything, and he was afraid of Boots. You know what I mean? Boots was the worst. Like, I couldn't even
Yeah.
have just regular Boots around him because he would just run away, scurry away, afraid. So I knew that he was in an abusive
Um,
situation. So I always so
yeah.
after that dog died, which was recently. I adopted a cat because I figured a cat would be nice. So I went to the Humane Society and I adopted a cat, and now he's like the biggest love bug that is super invasive. And I didn't realize how
Nice.
how invasive cats can really be until I got this one. But going forward, I'm all about adopting because I think it really brings value into not only your home but into your heart. You know what I mean? So I guess one thing for you I have to ask is,
Yeah.
what are some misconceptions about adopting animals?
So the biggest one, and we run a non-profit here, and we pull dogs out of shelters. And the biggest misconception, I think, is that people think that dogs that were surrendered to the shelter or found their way to a shelter are always in some way damaged. Actually, that's almost seldom the case. Most dogs will recover very quickly once brought into a loving home. Now, the other big misconception is people think, well, I have a job, so I have to work 8 hours a day, and I don't want to have to leave my dog in a crate or something like that. And when I hear that, I always tell people that dog is 50 times happier, even if they just get the evenings and the early mornings with you for a walk and some love and a safe, warm place to live all day. They're way happier than they are in the shelter, believe me. The shelter is a frightening, very traumatic experience for most dogs. So where people think, well, they'd be alone, they're fine. And to that, I always say, just get two dogs, then they'll keep each other company.
Right, the more the merrier. If anything, just they will be able to bond and do its thing because I'm not afraid of putting my dog in a kennel. I think that is something where it creates their space. You know what I mean? It lets them know that
Yep.
this is their space, this is their environment. If they need to go in there, they
Yep.
can. And especially if you make it
Yep.
comfortable, add a blanket, add a pillow, add a stuffed animal. Like, I've always added a stuffed animal into the crates because I
Yeah.
think that brings a bonding moment. They know that it's their toy, and when they're stressed out, they know to
Yeah.
go to it. You know what I mean? It's that personalness, and I think
I
that's something
I have a
that.
pit bull. I have a pit bull that does exactly that right now. Sorry to interrupt you. He's got this big teddy that he's had since we got him when he was about 10 weeks old, and he's about 6 months now.
Mm.
And he carries this thing around all over the place. Now he'll chew up everything else, but this toy, nope. It's just that's his little snuggie.
Yeah, it's this comfort, and I think that's something that people don't realize. They're like a little baby sometimes, you know what I mean? Their
Mhm.
personalities are all so different, and I think that's what I loved when you talked about the misconception thinking that just because they've been surrendered or that they can't manage a regular home because they're damaged. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's kind of ludicrous or kind of extreme way of seeing it because there's so many different variables that could come into part of why somebody may need to give up or surrender a dog. It doesn't necessarily always mean
yeah,
that they're bad. It just means that it was just a tough situation, you know? So it's like, what made you
exactly.
start this nonprofit to care for these animals?
So, great question. Initially, like I say, we were just a foster home. We volunteered for several different pounds and what have you. We fostered dogs when we lived in the Bay Area. When the pandemic hit, I what I do for a living is I train sales professionals in the technology industry, and that all switched to Zoom. Of course, that went remote. So when the pandemic hit, we thought, well, we can move out to the countryside. I'll be working from home anyway, and we can get a bit more property, and then we can get more dogs. So we have 9 acres now here, fenced up in a place called Grass Valley, California, and I actually wrote a book about it. It's called Rescuing Dogs and Sales People, because my career has really helped me with the dog training. I train humans and dogs and humans, in particular salespeople, they've got a lot of things in common, right? So you reward a dog with treats when you're training them, right? And salespeople get rewarded with commission and Rolexes and stuff like that, right? So the motivators are somewhat the same. And then also in sales, there's always a strong leader, a good alpha will, set a good standard for the pack. And it's the same in the dog world. We have an alpha dog here called Harry. He's only 40 pounds. He's half the size of several of the other dogs that are here in foster, but he is absolutely in charge and everybody knows it. And he's old, he's 13 years old. But, it just goes to prove that size, age, that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. It matters the environment that they're in and if they're strong leaders. We decided we had a couple of dogs that were unadoptable. They only really liked us. They bonded with the rescuers and then they were terrified of everybody else. So our home isn't just a dog rescue, it's also a sanctuary. So there's a couple of dogs we've had here for 2 to 3 years, and some we've had for 2 to 3 years that did in fact eventually get adopted, but they took that long to recover. You know, we had one dog last year that was flown from Azerbaijan to New York to Los Angeles, where I drove down and picked her up. She was with us for a little over a year recovering, and she's now been adopted and is living her fantastic best life on a huge farm. So for us, it was just, we were heartbroken with some of the dogs that we weren't able to survive. We weren't able to save. So what we did is we thought, well, let's just start a specialist rescue for those really damaged, really, really long-term recovery dogs. And I'm surrounded by 3 of them right now. You can't see them, of course. They're lying asleep on the floor. I've got another 5 of them outside in one of our enclosures.
That's amazing. I love how you provided this safe space so that if anybody knew that they weren't able to manage their dogs anymore, at least they were able to pass it along to somebody like yourself, so
Right.
that they know that these resources are available so that they don't just abandon these dogs out into
Yeah.
the world. Because I knew somebody that they found their landlord found out that they had dogs. They couldn't keep the dogs, and instead of taking them to a humane society, they decided to drive out into the country, dump them out
Happens
into
all the
the
time.
forest and allowing them to just fend for themselves. But thankfully, those dogs were smart enough, and they came right back to the house a day later. They
Oh,
found their
wow.
way. You know what I mean? So it just shows that dogs are
Yeah.
very intelligent and they remember this. You know what I mean? They have great
Oh,
memory.
yeah.
They have this a great understanding. And I was like, yo, this is a sign not to do this. And you should really find a home for them
Yeah.
or at least take them to the
Yeah.
humane society. Or go to different humane societies, go to different counties, but don't just abandon the dogs because they matter. They
Yeah.
have feelings, they have emotions, they cry, you know what I mean? They know these things. So she ended up taking it to another county and they were able to take the dogs, and I was like, yeah, don't ever do that again because that's just reckless and ruthless. So it's like my question to you is, what is your thoughts on breeders? Because I know a lot of the times people who are
Yeah.
pro adoptions, they are anti breeders. So what is your opinions?
So there's 2 schools, my late grandmother was actually a breeder and she bred Rhodesian backs. And, proper breeders, and this was in what was then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. Um, Proper breeders don't breed very frequently for a start. They don't overbreed their dogs. That's number one. And proper breeders know about weaning and socialization with those puppies before such time as they're ever adopted. Now, what we have a big problem here in America is with backyard breeders, right? And they are not
Mhm.
qualified. They don't have really the right facilities to breed dogs. And in a high percentage of the cases, the mother, the female, the breeding bitch is treated incredibly badly.
Mhm.
Almost never let out. It could be a lot of them are just basically tied to a stake all day long, and they don't get to do anything. So, we're obviously, and we've rescued many dogs from backyard breeders. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a trailer park a couple of hours away from here, where someone had abandoned a trailer, and in that abandoned trailer there was 9 puppies. And only the passers-by heard the crying and the screaming and what have you, that they called us and they said, we found all these puppies. I have two of them right outside right now. And that's a perfect example. That's not even a backyard breeder, that's a trailer breeder. They literally bred them in the back of this trailer and had them in a bathtub, if you can believe that, to keep them
Wow.
contained. So, yeah, we know the statistics are out there for everyone to see. If every breeder in America was to just stop breeding for 1 year, just one single year, the shelters would be pretty much empty. And we can prove that because in the pandemic, about 2 or 3 months into the pandemic, we went to the local shelter here in Yuba City. They only had two dogs in the shelter. Now, this is a shelter that would usually have between 70 and 100 dogs in it. And all of them
Wow.
were empty because when the pandemic hit, hundreds, maybe thousands of people thought, oh, I got to work from home now. I'm going to be home. Now is a good time to get a dog. And so an awful lot of people did that. But the problem is that when the pandemic cleared, all those people went back to work, and a lot of those dogs started tearing up their furniture or just barking all day because now they didn't understand where their human was all day. And so then we had this kind of crisis where the shelters were overflowing. And lost dogs were just being found. I mean, I would say probably once every month I get a phone call and somebody will say, hey, on Highway 20, just beside this turn, I've seen this big dog for 2 days wandering around. And so we'll have to
Mhm.
go over, we'll put some food and we'll try and find them. We'll pull them off the side of the road, bring them home. You do all the normal things, you put them all over Facebook and all over Pet Finder and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know whether you know that show 48 Hours. The truth is, when you find a dog, if somebody isn't looking for them in 48 hours, they're not looking for them. If you were to lose your dog, right, you would spend all minute of every day like trying to find him, right?
Mhm.
And you would read every post and what have you. And we sadly know when we've had a dog for a couple of days that, yeah, somebody actually just drove along in their car, went to a remote part, and we live in the countryside, so it's very quiet around here
Yeah.
and they just dumped them on the side of the road. We actually had one dog that was delivered to our gate by another neighborhood dog, and this is a great story. So we live on a loop, and it's a private road, so there's no through traffic. So when people dump dogs around here, they do so for a reason. One, they know there's a shelter here, and
Mhm.
two, there's no traffic; they're not going to get hit by a car. So one morning, I go out to my gate, and my neighbor has a giant Pyrenees dog who wanders the neighborhood all day long, very friendly. But this Pyrenees is standing at my gate with a husky that I've never seen and nobody's ever seen before. And we sort of bring around the neighbors and say, does anybody missing a husky? And they're like, no. And he sat there at my gate until I finally went down and opened the gate, and the husky came running in, and then he went off back home. So he literally, it's almost like the dogs have their own little back, underground network. And he found this lost dog somewhere and said, hey, I know where there's lots of dogs. Let me bring you down there. We had his name is Wolfie. We had him for I think 4 or 5 months. He was adopted twice and returned twice, and then finally adopted out of Canada. And I drove up to the Canadian border and I delivered him to a wonderful family. And he's living his best life in the snow where a husky belongs, up above the snow line in Canada.
Yeah.
So it comes from every different angle, is what I'm saying, Mitzi. It's funny, like some of them are shelter pulls, some of them are found on the side of the road. Probably not a day goes by that we don't get a call where they say, hey, we have this dog and we can't keep him anymore. Is there any chance you could take him into your rescue? And the sad thing is, you just can't keep saying yes all the time. We're pretty much entirely self-funded. So, there's a limit to what we can actually do. And vet care, as you probably know, is super, super expensive.
Yes, yes. I mean, especially with shots, it can get very expensive. I mean, yeah, you can order them. Yeah, you can administer them yourselves if you know where and all the proper procedures. But at the end of the day, it still adds up with time. And if especially if you're self-funded, it really takes a toll on your financial budget as a family in general. So I respect it. And I love the story about how the dog just knew. And I do believe that dogs just have their own communication, this
Mm.
understanding, because they really do. They just have this understanding. And it's lovely how the dog knew, like, you know what? This is a good guy. All the dogs are they talk good about him. Why don't you just go here
Yeah.
and you'll be safe, you know what I mean? Just wait right here. He'll
Yeah.
come. He's coming. Just wait. Okay, now he's here. Go in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll see you later. You know what I mean? That
It
is
was like a drop
truly
off.
yeah, it truly is amazing because you would never really, nobody would actually believe it unless you actually, you know what I mean, seen it yourself.
Yeah.
And the fact that
Yeah.
you actually did, it makes it holds so much more value because it just shows that dogs' lives matter. You know what I mean? They care. They know
Yeah.
what's going on. And the fact that that dog was willing to help him, I mean, just shows even more values. And I love the fact that
Yeah.
you say you have this older dog that's 14 years old and he's a tiny little thing and he runs
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
show. He's the alpha and all the other dogs submit and they know their place around him because it really does hold value when you have that alpha dog in your establishment because they really do keep order and they keep the rough housing down to
That's
a
right.
minimum and they
That's
know
right.
who's acting up and all they got to do is just come with their presence and the other ones will warn them. They'll announce it like he's coming. Woo! You know what I mean? They do their dog things. I know exactly what you mean, and I also want to touch base about you how you talked about this backyard breeding, and it is a real thing. Like I've seen it firsthand. I was a breeder myself, but we did things the right way. We didn't breed right away. We allowed their period to come, and we didn't breed back to back to back to back because that
Yeah.
was excessive. It takes
Yeah.
a toll on the
Yeah.
females. Like people don't
Yeah.
realize it really takes a toll on the female's life if you continue to breed
Yeah.
them over and over and over again, and especially the size of the dog, it takes a very big toll. Like I've heard
Yeah.
situations where French bulldogs, oh my goodness, they've lost their lives by trying to have the home backyard breedings and they don't realize that some of these dogs in the shape and the condition that they're in they can't just have produce like 7 8 puppies at a time, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, because of the position of their body, and when they have like just 2 to 3 that can cost their life in general too because they
That's
can
right.
get stuck. So it's like you really have to be observant, you really have to pay attention, and you
Yeah.
can't just give the puppies away at 1 2 weeks just because you can't handle it. That's
No.
not healthy. You know what I mean? You need to do things the right way. Like I've
Yeah.
seen conditions where I've seen backyard breeders where they do things very sloppy, very nasty, very ugly. Like I don't even know what they're feeding them anymore. You know what I mean? Because it's just recklessness. And so it's like we really do have to do our due diligence as humans to pay attention to that. And I also like the fact that you talked about how the pandemic it made everybody realize, oh, I need an animal, but then it's like, oh, well, I can't really take into care of an animal now.
Yeah.
The people really have to remember that animals are more than just an accessory. You know what I mean? They're more than
Yeah.
just a pet purse or
Yeah.
something that you can mount on the wall or something like that. It's they really hold value in more than ways than
Yeah.
one. And I think that's truly crucial for people to really realize. And it sucks that time is catching up to us, Ian, because I feel like I could keep picking your brain on these topics and about dogs in general. But what can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
You probably know this as well. Breed is very important. A lot of adopters will adopt a dog because they like the look of them, you know? So you think of like Aussie Shepherds and dogs like that. They're not dogs that want to live in an apartment or a condo, you know?
Mm.
Likewise, livestock guarding dogs. A lot of people love those big, lovely, fluffy Bernese and Pyrenees and that. And they think, oh, what a beautiful dog. But those dogs want a job. They're
Yeah.
not cuddly dogs. They want to protect goats and sheep and stuff like that, So I guess my what I say to a lot of adopters is, are you familiar with the breed? Do you know the traits of the breed? And when you're adopting from a breeder, good breeders will always tell you that, right? They will ask you those
Hmm.
questions first. They'll say, you want a pit bull or a German shepherd or whatever it is, you need to know about that breed so that you can speak their language and they'll be a happy, complacent dog. There's a couple of exceptions to the rule, sure. I've had Labradors that don't want to fetch, and I've had German shepherds that don't want to hurt anything. So there are exceptions, but in general, as you probably know yourself, breed specific is very important so that people know with the personality and the traits of the dog.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100% because a lot of the times people like, oh, I want a big dog and they get themselves a Great Dane, but not realizing that they have hip complications and they don't always like
Yeah,
to be mobile all the time. So then you have to take that into consideration. If you're trying to find a walking
yeah,
dog to walk up hikes, I mean, that type of dog is not going to be your forte. So it's like you really do
yeah,
have to pay attention with the breeds because people don't even realize like just even a wiener dog likes to
yeah.
round things up, and hurt things up, and it's like if you don't allow them to do that, then what is their purpose? They're going to feel
Right.
depleted in some one way or another, and they're going to act out of character, and then you're going to be like, oh, but he's just a bad dog. Like, no,
Yeah,
he just doesn't know how to like let go of this all this built up anxiety, built up
exactly.
stimulation that needs to get him going and moving. So it's like, yes, educating yourself on knowing the breed is so crucial and so important because like those huskies are not meant to live in the south or by the equator.
That's
Oh
right.
my goodness, it
Right.
used to drive me crazy whenever I when I lived in Florida and I used to see owners of huskies. I'm like, why are you doing this to them? Send them up north, go up north on vacation,
Right.
don't come down south. Like, this is the worst place for them. Like, they're just exhausted by the heat, but that
Yeah,
coldness, that snow, that's what they're made for. You know what I mean? They're made for
that's
all
right.
of that. So it's like when you talked about that earlier, like I was just like, yes, that holds so much value because people need to know this and do their due diligence because it can not only save that dog's life, but it can save your life as well. Because if you get
Yeah,
the right dog,
yeah,
it can provide you warning of intruders. It can, you know what I mean? It can truly protect you, you know what I mean, in
yeah,
ways that other dogs can't. So it's like you really have to do that due diligence and know what you're looking for and know what you're doing. And I think
yeah,
it'll all go well as long as you just do that homework, taking that little steps,
yeah.
especially if
That's
you
right.
have like a mutt, you know what I mean? One that has multiple breeds in one, then do
Yeah,
your research on every breed because if they have a little bit of stuff of terrier in them, if they have a little husky in them, if they have a little shepherd in them, then at
that's
least you
right.
know how to like maneuver them and deal with them in any way. And if you just get a lazy dog, well then hey, be happy that he's a lazy dog, right? And hopefully you're a lazy person. Right? That all adds
Look
up.
out for
But
both of you.
exactly, it works out for the both of you. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, go check out Ian. I have access to his website, access to all the great information that he has to offer the world, great content so that you can continue on thinking. Because isn't that the point? Yes, it is. Continue on thinking, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.